Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, the guide to Italian travel. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor.
And today, we're going to talk about trains.
We are. It's also a bit of a stormy day. We've been having, for the last week and a half, I think, we've been having kind of these, mid-afternoon thunderstorms for about 4.5 hours.
Yeah, lots of end of summer storm sort of things.
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of, in the background, we try to record these at quiet times, which is usually lunch, because nobody's revving their engines and, making noise. They were tilling the field below our apartment earlier with those little, what is it, a little mechanical plow, I guess?
It sounds like a garden jackhammer.
It does sound like a garden jackhammer. It's very loud. It's loud only because we're right next to it. So we waited for it to all settle down, and of course now there's thunder, but the thunder's quite nice.
Did you hear all the dirt bikes yesterday afternoon?
I did not.
Oh, I had my studio door open. I'm a painter. I was painting.
So subtle.
I was painting, and it was so nice and peaceful until it sounded like 8 people on dirt bikes were driving all over below town. I think they do, making me full of rage.
Yes. No, that one's the one I think that does it's I try to have patience until it's the unmuffled motor sound that I just lose my mind. But that does not have anything to do with trains.
It's a form of transportation.
It's definitely
Instead
related.
of riding your dirt bike and being allowed.
You could have taken the train through town.
You could have taken the train.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I guess before we get started, thank you all to everyone who has been following us, to leaving comments, to subscribing, to rating the podcast. We do genuinely appreciate it. It's very, very helpful, and it makes us feel good, which is, we do it for the vanity, basically. This is a vanity project. Not really. It's more than that. But yeah, if you'd like to follow along, you can just hit subscribe, and I guess you get notifications that there's a new episode, and every Wednesday. As long as we're on time, it's usually every Wednesday around 11. We try to be 11 on the dot, but sometimes it's 11:05.
Our time, right?
Good point. Yeah. What is that? Oh man.
It's early, 5 a.m. East Coast.
It's 5 a.m. East Coast time. I think that's 2 a.m. West Coast time, 10 a.m. England. I have no idea Australia. I think we're 6 hours behind. It could be 7. So afternoon, basically, Australia. Yeah, 11 is such an arbitrary time, but I think it's because we do it for anybody who might be on the East Coast. We're oh yeah, you can get up at 5 a.m. and listen to this podcast. If you'd like to also follow us on other channels, we have an Instagram, Only a Bag Podcast, which is Instagram. We have an email, onlybagpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, something you want to hear, something you don't want to hear, pictures of your cat.
Yes.
We have an email, and then I think we also have a website. It's a pretty good website, if I may say so myself. Onlyabag.com. A lot of the stuff we try to put into articles, though I will say we're not always that successful with timing. We might do this. This episode is coming out on the, what is it, the 3rd? 4th? 4th?
I think it's the 4th. Goodness gracious, we're already in September.
I know, I can't believe we're in September. It has flown by. August has disappeared. And so, yeah, this will probably not be an article for a while until I get some time to write one up. But that does not mean there are not other beautiful articles on the website. I think that's everything.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we should get into it.
And we can dive right in. This is also, if I may, before you dive in, a kind of a continuation on a similar theme we had a few episodes ago, maybe 4 episodes ago. We were talking about, not necessarily, I don't even think it was the when to book trains. It might have been a different one. But we did talk about
I think we talked about when to book your hotel, your train, and your flight.
Is that when we talked about the differences of trains, or I think we talked about that even before? I think honestly we might have touched on it, the history of Ferragosto or something. We might have talked about trains.
Okay.
So this is just kind of a continuation of, for those of you coming to Italy who are looking to obviously travel around via train, and who are not entirely sure what the differences are. That is the purpose of this episode, if that makes sense. So, Darcy, take us away. Introduce us to this ferroequinologist world.
Is, maybe we should quickly, everybody, I think most people know what ferroequinology is, but it's such a cool word. It means iron horse.
It does.
And ferroequine means iron horse.
But also in Italy, it's called ferrovie, is the railway system. which is ferro is still iron, and VA is streets, plural. So it's iron streets.
Or Iron Road.
Or Iron Road. So that is the for fun little bit of thing. If you sometimes you'll see like it's like the I don't know, it's like the Ferrovia Associazione, like the association of train lines. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And which I always, for the longest time, I thought that was trains, and I was like, what's like? They have the word treno, but that's the word like treno, but also the word like ferrovie. And then I realized like, oh my god, it's railways, not trains. So fun little tidbit.
I know, right? So cool. So the first thing we're going to talk about is like practicalities of regular trains and the differences of like, the regular trains you're going to take when you're here in Italy from Rome to Florence, or, regular trains. And then we're going to get into these historical train trips you can take, which I'm super excited about. I really want to try one. And then luxury train travel, which is available. So you know what's coming up. So let's get into first the difference between regular trains in Italy. So there's two companies, right?
Predominantly. I think that's fair.
Two major regular train travel companies. So there's Italo, which is a private company, right? Mm-hmm. And then TrenItalia, which is is it government sponsored?
It's just a state-run train service.
Okay. So cool that exists.
I think it's kind of like Amtrak. I think Amtrak is technically is it? I think is a government run. I'm not entirely sure.
I feel like we've had this conversation before.
I know, because if you look in like all of Europe predominantly has each, like obviously UK has like British Rail. I think France has the TGV is the fast train, but they have their own, like, I think each one, like the Deutsche Bahn is in Germany. I think each country in Italy or in Europe has their own train service. And I don't know if all of them also allow private trains to operate in their country, because Italy does, but I don't know if all of them do. So yeah, that just for anybody who's listening, who's like, oh, I wonder if they're all connected. They're not connected. They're all individual. Like, I mean, unfortunately, there's no like Orient Express in that sense anymore. Like you can't.
But trains do go from one country to another.
For sure, yes. But you will have to, like, I think you can get a TrenItalia train to like from Milan to Paris,
and to like Switzerland and.
Oh, for sure, yeah. So I was thinking like the farthest you can get is Paris, but then if you were going to go all the way to England, you'd have to switch in Paris. Yes. If you want to go to like Porto or something like that, you'd have to switch in Marseille. Mm-hmm.
Like if you're going from Florence to Brussels, you would then, if you're going from Brussels onward, you would switch to
whatever the Brussels train is.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm spacing entirely.
But it's not going to be an Italian-based train, is my point.
That's a good point. So yeah, that's good. That's a good piece of information. Two train lines, Italo and TrenItalia.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Italo we don't use as much. We've used Italo a few times, but it is so. Let's go through that one first, because TrenItalia has a lot more to break down.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of more options. So Italo is high-speed rail, super fast. There is also a super fast TrenItalia. So Italo is super fast. They have 3 classes essentially. It's essentially like first and second class in business, but they call them fancy names. So there's smart class, which is economy, regular seats. And then there's prima, business class, which is like business class, plus you get like free snacks, I think. With the smart class, the basic economy, there's vending machines which are available to you, which you have to pay for. But then the prima business class, you get free snacks and like slightly more leg room, I think, and like fake leather seats.
Everything I deserve for business class.
And then in the club class, and by the way, they call these, if you're looking in English on the site, they call them the ambiances. So they don't call them like, which class seat do you want to buy? They're like, which ambiance do you prefer?
Amazing.
I know.
I love that.
It's
like
fancy.
a little marketing technique. Which ambiance do you want to invest in for your future? Well, that's a good question.
How do you want to treat yourself?
Yeah.
So then the biggest, the highest grade, I guess, is the club class, the club ambiance. And that comes with access to the Italo clubs in the train stations, like the lounges.
That makes sense. Okay.
And then you get not more snacks, but I think higher quality snacks. And I think they even they're like round the clock access to the people who work on the train, not like the conductor, but like you can always interact with the, I don't know what you would call them.
Not the conductor, like just like is it somebody who it's kind of like a steward?
Yeah. Thank you
Okay.
for that word. Something like that. So it's the fanciest option.
We, I
they
think,
have.
took that one time during COVID because during COVID, a lot of these, it was kind of a fun time to take a train because they were doing half-filled trains. So, like, it would be typically, at least on TrenItalia, and I think on, no, not on Italo, just TrenItalia, they typically do have like four seats together, looking at each other, two looking at the other two with a table in the middle. That's like their standard configuration, which sounds like a weird thing to describe, but it's like two seats, table, two seats, they're looking at each other. And during COVID, you could only they were running this half capacity. So like Darcy and I traveling together would get this entire little section to ourselves, and it was really quite nice. And a few times we'd be able to get like the executive or club, is this what it's called? Mm-hmm. We were on Italo once, I think, for club. Because it was so much, it was like just ridiculously cheap for it. It was like 40 euros for two people, and it's usually like 100 and something euros for two people. So of course, we couldn't say no to this, and we made a tremendous mistake because we didn't realize that the guy pushing the snack cart around was offering them for free. We thought it was like the opportunity to buy them once you get to this place, and he hit us first, and then he went through the thing, and I realized everybody else was getting snacks for free, and I was just like, oh my god. I've missed my chance for free food.
Did we go and get some?
I don't think we did. I think we felt so
crazy.
we were not in that place yet, because this was a few years ago where we were like, can we do that? Is that appropriate? Is he going to come through again at the next station? Mm-hmm. He never did.
And during COVID, I think everybody was worried about just interacting in general. So I'm sure we were nervous about wandering away from our seat and
there's definitely that
more interactions than necessary.
Yeah, and I think because it was like, it's like one of those weird things you were supposed to simultaneously accept the drink and snack, but also keep your mask on. So everyone was just like shoving food under their mask to eat. But no, that's all to say is we had a very lovely experience on the club. And we did not get to experience the lounge because that was closed for COVID. Mm-hmm. However, I've looked at reviews and it seems to be just like extra sitting room, which sounds useless, but I think we've talked about this before. Pretty much every train station in Italy has like 6 chairs, seating, yes. I think. And you have to fight for them. I think you're legally obligated to fight for them. But it's a really
Unless
weird...
like an older or pregnant person comes up, and then you have to give up your seat.
Yes. Except if you're apparently anybody who goes to these train stations, because they don't. They're just like, oh, I'm not going to stand up.
No, I've seen a lot of people give up their seats.
Okay. Yeah. Because I feel like I've seen a lot of people just kind of sitting like on the edges because like there's really nowhere to sit. It's it really is a shame. Rome's gotten a little better, I think, because they have the... I don't know, it's like up the staircase, up the escalators. Mm-hmm. There's the entire like dining area, and there's a bunch of different restaurants.
But you do have to buy something to sit there, and you can sit there for a while.
That's what I'm curious about, because a lot of people just sit there, and in Naples as well, people just sit there without buying anything. And I'm curious what the legality of it is. I'm curious because it's like in an airport, I would expect if you're sitting somewhere, you have to kind of buy something to sit there. But there, I don't know. I've seen a lot of people just sit like. Not eating anything, not drinking anything, just sitting there. Like, but I mean, they could have just ordered or something like that. But it seems like, and typically it's on the outskirts of the. It's not like right in the heart of the eating areas.
Interesting.
But that's all to say is sometimes if you are traveling by yourself, you're traveling with a partner, even a family, and you're like, I really need to sit. And this could just simply be like if you got off a flight at 9 o'clock and you have to get, then jump onto a train, and your train's not for another hour and a half. It is not a bad idea to, try to get access to a lounge or something because, again, there's nowhere to sit in Rome.
And the lounges have seating is the point.
And the lounges have seating, exactly. Yeah.
One interesting thing about Italo is I find it so odd that this is one of their perks. If you have an American Express credit card, you can get bumped up a class essentially. So if you purchase like the smart basic class, you can get bumped up to the prima class. I think that it's like a first year is free, and then after 1 year there's like a yearly fee of like 60 euros or something. 66
Interesting.
euros.
Okay.
But I find it so odd that it's American Express because that is not an Italian credit card.
Yeah. And as we've mentioned in previous episodes, American Express does not have like full usability in Italy by any stretch of the imagination.
Most places don't accept American Express.
So just for what it's worth, like, and I think when your mom visited, she brought a couple different cards on the assumption that some would want work. And I don't know if one of them was American Express, but I think one was like Wells Fargo or Bank of America, and that didn't work anywhere.
She did have a lot of trouble with her cards.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
And I don't know if it was one of those things where, again, they're a little bit more like, again, we've mentioned this before. We have Charles Schwab for debit cards and Capital One basically for credit cards. And for both, like for Charles Schwab, we've had to put in which countries we're going to be in so they don't cancel our card as soon as we use it. But for Capital One, we don't. It's like, I don't know, they have something that like, we have in like, I don't know, some sort of ridiculous algorithm to tell if you're actually there or not. I'm like, yeah, what is the algorithm? I bought a plane ticket and now I'm there. Like, that's not
just like hacked into our computers and watching us all the time.
Really
like, no, we have eyes on you.
Yeah.
We know you're there.
Because sometimes it's a little sketchy with the Capital One when it's like we use it like literally in Rome, like getting art supplies, and then 14 hours later we're in Savannah again, and then we're getting drinks or something like that, and they're like, I'm like, how is that not blocked? I mean, of course, they would probably know. We've been in those two cities a lot, but the first time
we're always buying drinks and art supplies.
Yeah. One thing like North Macedonia, I thought for sure when we went there, they would cancel the card, and they did not.
Yeah.
And I think later I did put in a little request to be like, please don't. And they're like, no worries, we knew you were there. I'm like, that's weird. Don't. Let me tell you. So that all being said is if you have American Express, you are bringing it and you're using it for this, there might be some other perks like that. This is the first one we've heard of. And there might be other ones like that, but I would not use that as your primary travel credit card
Definitely
by any
not.
stretch of the imagination.
No. That's kind of all I have to say about Italo. Do you have anything else to add?
The only things I would add is it is, as you mentioned, fast trains only. It's a different seating setup on the Smart.
Yeah. Do you remember what it is?
It's usually two seats next to each other, and on the other side of the aisle, I think it's a one seat by itself, or maybe sometimes it's two seats by itself. I can't remember.
And do they face each other?
They don't.
They don't have the cool table situation.
No. So essentially, it's like airplane seats, except at the midpoint, you have four seats facing each other, and then it's two seats the rest. So basically, half the carriage is always going to face the direction the train is going. The other half of the carriage is always going to face away from the direction the train is going.
Okay.
And if you're somebody, by the way, who gets motion sickness, for lack of a better word, at this sort of, if you get motion sickness when you're moving the wrong way, if you're looking the wrong way, then the train is moving, I especially recommend TrenItalia, because if you're booking because you can't choose your seat, unfortunately, in any of these. There's no way to choose your seat. It's always automatically assigned. But at least if you're traveling with a partner on like TrenItalia, there's a much higher chance that one of you is going to have a seat looking in the direction the train is going. But even like, depending where you're going and where you're coming from, like I think in Naples, Garibaldi, I think in Rome, and I think in Milan, at least those three, possibly Florence as well, the train pulls in and then reverses and goes the other direction, basically. So even if you're going in the right direction, like you're going from Rome to Milan, or sorry, you're going from Naples to Florence, let's just say, when you get to Rome, you might be facing the direction the train's going, but then as it leaves Rome, you're going to be facing in the wrong direction. So it's nice sometimes, I think, Frecciarossa or just the TrenItalia trains, because you booking with one other person, you almost are always booked seating across from each other, not seated next to each other. I think you and I are rarely.
Yeah, you're always sat across from each other, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like, so you're always sitting next to a stranger, but across from the person you booked with, which is a kind of an interesting way to prioritize the seating. There does lead to some fun conversations, and I guess it makes sense though too, because I don't have to stare at a stranger.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
I get to stare at you.
You don't have to constantly make eye contact with a stranger.
Exactly. I just have to rub shoulders with them. So that's the biggest thing. Is seating arrangement, I think, is the biggest thing on Italo. They also have, it's not bad to check Italo occasionally for options, because they do a lot of, like Rome to Milan, they run a lot, because they're relied on by like people who go to Milan for business, for like a meeting, and then go back to Rome, and vice versa. So they do really frequent trips between Milan and Rome, for example. But they don't have that many discounts, which is what I think you and I stopped. We originally took them frequently, and we stopped because it was like, oh, this is not cheaper. Like at first, I think when they're like at base price, they're pretty much the exact same ticket.
As TrenItalia.
As
and
TrenItalia,
Italo.
the fast train, the Frecciarossa. I think it's like Italo sometimes is a little cheaper than the base rate for the TrenItalia. But when we found if you get any of their many discounts, it ends up being way cheaper to go through TrenItalia.
Yeah.
So I think you and I prefer
Italo
that.
does have, whenever I just checked today, they run like seasonal sales.
Okay.
So like TrenItalia will often have like the 2-for-1 price. Is that the same as Me and You? What they call Me and You?
No, technically no.
So they have the 2-for-1 price, and what is it called? Italo has 2-for-1 only for summer right now. So I think if you catch them at the right time, you could get a good price, but it's not as regularly discounted as
that's good to know.
TrenItalia.
Because I think one thing I noticed, and it's funny, it might be because the American Express. The last time you and I took the Italo was 2 years ago, 2 years and change, when your mom was here, and a number of people on the Italo train were American. But on TrenItalia, a lot more people were not necessarily Italian, just not American, like just traveling from somewhere else. And I'm wondering now if it was because it just was, that's like, if Italo is trying to get if they just assume that everybody in America has American Express and they try to get because that's not a bad idea. There's basically American Express has one of their cards is free. There's no yearly fee. I think they only have one card that has no yearly fee. And I'm wondering if you can use that if for Italo's little thing, if it's any American Express or if it's only like, I think their blue card is one that starts at $99 a year or something.
That's a good question. I don't know.
But it's an interesting little not travel hack, but it's an interesting travel thing to get, because almost across the board, like I'm thinking like Delta, you have to pay, I think it's $100 a year for the Delta Airlines card that'll get you bumped up. And this seems free, at least for the first year. And if you're only coming to Italy once every 5 years, it's like, all right, fine. The last thing I was going to say is I do think they have really good customer service. You have to call for the customer service, and I don't think they speak very much English. They might now that they do have an agreement with American Express. But we once made the mistake of going to Napoli a Fragola instead of Napoli Centrale, which is like a Fragola is like the
Afragola.
Afragola. Oh, that's right. I always think it Afragola because it's a little
Strawberry.
Yeah, it is not Afragola. Thank you. And we made that mistake, but we called them, and instead of charging us to change it, which they should have charged us to change it and then charged us the difference. She was like, no, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. You're good. I changed it for you. Yeah. New tickets sent to your email. You're great. Have a fun trip. Enjoy Naples. And I was like, that is the most amazing customer service I've ever received in Italy ever. So I will say, in their defense, that was huge. But yeah, I think it's a bit of a toss-up. It just depends how you like to sit, and basically what kind of, again, as we're going to get into TrenItalia, for me, like the vending machines are just a kind of a bummer. Like even though they do make coffee, I want a real person. I still have that, like, I want to, walk through the train and grab my little cup of coffee and my, my newspaper and bring it back to the seat.
We always do that. We get coffee on the train every time just because it's so fun.
Well, I think we missed that. I mean, obviously we are 29 years old. We missed that sort of, Orient Express, or even just like the sort of heyday of train travel when it was like, they had the fully stocked bar car, and you'd hang out in the bar for the whole trip because you just like met somebody on the train and you're chatting with them. And I think I always think train travel is like that. Like I spent 2 days on a train in China thinking, oh, it's going to be gorgeous. I'm going to go through the countryside. And I spent two days in this like locked, car because they wouldn't allow you to go through the cars. So you have to stay in the car you were at, and you weren't allowed to leave the car when you got into a platform. You had to stay in the car. And I think eventually one of the guys kind of negotiated, like, can I just get some air? Like, just not these people. Like, I just need air from horrible. Outside. It was a disaster. I mean, it was a disaster. So I think that I've always in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm going to find this train one day that's going to be like that. And I haven't yet, but I think the TrenItalia gets pretty close.
Yeah.
So with that being said, the TrenItalia.
Okay. So, should we talk about the food car on TrenItalia real quick?
Yeah, why not, right?
Just because it's so cool. So they do have a real person, and there is a real bar, meaning Italian style bar. So coffee, drinks. I think they have like beer and prosecco or something for purchase, and like snacks and stuff.
The coffee is also for purchase, but it's almost all of it for purchase. To be clear,
sorry. In the snack car, it is all for purchase. But the coffee is like, it's slightly more than.
I think it's like $1.50 instead of $1 at the train station.
But on I think all the journeys we've been on through TrenItalia, it's a real person, and they make actual coffee, not from a pod. Like it's a real espresso machine, which is very cool. And then on which class was it that we were business class and we got free snacks?
Yeah. Again, that's one of those things where technically for another couple months, we still get the young price when we take the train. And the young price weirdly works for, I don't think it works for executive, which we'll get into the classes in a minute, but it works, I think, all the way to business. And so we got a really cheap deal. Like, I think instead of $72 for the second class, it was like $81 for business. So we got business class. It came with, I think again, it was one of those things where we accepted their little entry, here's a little gift basket of like some cookies and some, a bottle of water but I think they asked if you want anything else. And you're like, no, it's okay. And then you tracked them down later.
I did.
And came back with a little cup of coffee and a glass of Prosecco. I guess, if you're going to be on a train in Italy, you have to be on a train in Italy,
Yeah, it was so great.
I will say too, the food car does have sandwiches, snacks. They do have like kind of a nice spread. Like if it is something where, like, I don't recommend it over eating before you get on the train, but if you are, like, I think if something, one of those things, if you get on at like 11 and you're not going to get off till 5 because you're going from Rome or Naples to Milan, it's not the end of the world. They have nice sandwiches. They have chips and little snacks and peanuts or whatever it is, Prosecco, beer, Campari soda, coffee. So you can absolutely, I mean, it's a little, like, as you mentioned, it's a little more expensive for sure than a restaurant might be, but it's not like airport food. It's not even airplane food. I was blown away that, like, British Airways, again, I don't know if it's like a British thing versus American thing. American, you get the drink and the snack, and British Airways is like, we give you water, but everything else you have to pay for. And I was like, what kind of service is
That's insane.
It blew my mind. And the woman next to me, they both got a cup, like a tea for £3 each. And I was like,
wait,
what are you talking
where
about?
was this from? From England to Italy?
From England to Italy. But
Okay.
and I think when you and I did a flight, it was somehow within England, or was it, or some other flight we did, another British Airways flight, it was the same thing that you and I found, that it was the same thing where it's like, I've never seen where you have to pay, like in America you have to pay for like the fancy drinks and the fancy snacks, the alcohol.
You get a free
but you get the
soda or juice
like
or
half
whatever.
cup of soda and like your packet of peanuts. And this was like, wow, nothing. My guys, we have it better.
That's crazy.
It was just the first time I've ever flown, like, I think, and thought that like it's better in America, because it usually feels worse. It feels like aggressively worse, almost across the board. And this was the first time I was like, this is really nice. Sorry, that's way off topic. What is on topic is the fact that there is a bar car, and it's a pretty stocked bar car, and it's usually in the business. It usually takes up half the business class, but anyone's allowed to go to it. It's not just for business. You can walk from any point in the train. Just I guess be sure that you're not in one of those trains that you when you, and I guess I'll put it here. When you book the train on, especially like on TrenItalia or TrainLine, they will tell you if it's possible to walk from one end of the train to the other, because sometimes they kind of put the two engine cars together, so it makes it like carriages 1, 2, 3, 4 are separate physically from 5, 6, 7, and 8. And this is only important in cases where there are. They do have family cars, I think, on some InterCity and some Frecciarossas, which essentially I think have like dedicated changing areas, as well as like places to put the little stroller and things like that. But sometimes those are disconnected from like the food.
Interesting.
Yeah, well, because it's like, I think that's carriage 4 and carriage 5 is where the food is. So they're like, oh, you can't actually get there. So they do warn you, if like you're a family who also wants to have a coffee, don't get on that train. Get on the one earlier or after. Yeah. So
what if you're seated in the family car, but you want to get a coffee on the train? You can't do that.
Yeah, I think they tell you that. I mean, that's
but when
where
you book, it's stated there. Okay.
They state there that like you won't be able to reach. If there's a family car available, they'll tell you won't be able to reach the family car from cars 1, 2, 3, and 4. Or if there's a dining car available, they'll tell you won't be able to reach the dining car, which is appreciated. It's like a little heads up. It's like, hey, you're gonna have a subpar experience. I assume.
On that note, there's also the quiet car, which I love when people actually follow the rules. It's like the little library car. There's not fun books. It's just that everybody's supposed to be quiet.
I think it's only business and above, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Yes, there's no economy silent. So it's business car and then business silent. However, in our experience, that is not that listened to.
No, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And sometimes people will shush other people.
Which is amazing to see in action. It's phenomenal.
I never shush anybody. But when other people shush people, it's like, oh, it's getting spicy.
Yeah, I love that. But I think so taking it from the top, looking at TrenItalia from the top.
I have one other note for food.
Hit me with it.
Just you are allowed to bring food on. Like most people will grab pizza or a sandwich or something, because obviously a lot of people are traveling through lunchtime. You're totally allowed to buy that outside of the train station or in the train station and bring it on into the car.
Very good point. Yes, and that goes for Italo, TrenItalia, pretty much any train in Italy, any form of transportation, except like. Well, no, even flights. Like, I mean, I brought pastries back from Naples to Savannah because you're allowed to bring them on board.
Did you buy them at the airport?
Through security.
Okay, after security.
After security,
okay.
Yeah. But then they got scanned through security in Philadelphia. If that makes sense. I had to go through another metal detector, the little like, box detector. I don't know. I had a little bag of pastries, or box of pastries. So yes, that's a good point. You can bring food.
I would gather that you can't bring on and drink your own alcohol from outside because I haven't seen anybody do that. If that's something you want to do, I would just check the rules on the website.
That's a really good point because you can drink anywhere. Like in Italy, there's no public drinking laws. You can drink literally anywhere at any time for any reason. So I'm it's a good point. I don't think we've ever seen people have like a beer that they brought on the train.
I don't think so.
Or even bottles like left in the little bins.
No, I think it's just if you buy it on the train.
Then you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not sure. Okay, so taking it from the top, meaning like all of the options of trains for TrenItalia. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hit me with it.
So they have the Freccia trains, which are the faster trains. So Frecciarossa is the fastest. And then there's Frecciargento, Frecciarossa is the red Freccia. Frecciargento is the silver Freccia. That's second to fastest. And then there's, Freccia Bianca, which is third fastest in the fast category.
And Freccia just means arrow for anybody wondering.
Thank you. I always forget that.
So it's just red arrow, silver arrow, and white arrow. Which makes it a little bit easier to remember. But Frecciarossa, Freccia Bianca, Frecciargento.
And so the fast trains only stop in big cities, right?
Pretty much. I think, so the Frecciarossa is an easiest way to think about it is big city to big city, pretty much across the board. There's like, and we've talked about this before, in Siena, for example, you can't get a Frecciarossa there. They have last time we checked, they have no fast train line to Siena, which means like they don't have the equipment.
They don't have the infrastructure
to have a fast train go there. So I don't even think you can get like a Freccia Bianca or Frecciargento to Siena. I think you have to get InterCity. I think you always have to switch in Florence, or you can switch somewhere else, or you can just take InterCity from Rome probably. But you can't take fast train. So fast train, like again, you can think of it like Venice, Milan, Bolzano, Florence, Rome, Salerno, Naples, Reggio Calabria. I think maybe Bari, and there's a handful of others in there as well that are either they aren't necessarily big cities, but they are like around here. Where we are, a very small area, they might build a fast train station, but it's because it would be servicing like the 190,000 people that live in the area that would drive like the 15 minutes to the train station. So it's not while it's typically big city to big city, it's not always big city to big city. Sometimes it's like to a random far-flung area that just happens to be near a bunch of small towns. But that's an easy way to think about it. So if you're going, like again, Rome to Milan, take the Frecciarossa. If you're going Rome to Florence, Frecciarossa. Super simple.
Yeah. And so with any of the Freccia lines, you can reserve your seat in advance, and they have different classes. Second class is, I have it in my notes. What do they call it?
I think it's called standard.
Standard. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Standard. And then first class is prima.
Something like that. I wouldn't trust these too much because, online when you book the ticket, it's going to say second class, first class, business, and executive.
Okay. Thank you.
It's just on the side of the train, I think, where it says like standard, and then it has, I think prima is the first class, or maybe something else, or something equally like run up the marketing chain to figure out if it's palatable. I don't even think on the ticket. I think the ticket even says first class, second class, or if anything, or business executive. So you don't have to keep these funky little names in mind. That's just for the actual outside of the train itself. On the website, it's still second first. Unlike Italo, which on the website is smart and then Prima and Club.
Yeah, very confusing. So second, first, business, and executive are your options for the Freccia lines.
Yes. Plus, I think, as we mentioned, business does have business silent, and executive has something called executive salotino, I think, which is these little executive rooms that you can get, which seats 4 people in a room, sort of like I don't know, like the old school.
Like a cubicle?
Kind of like a cubicle, has a little sliding door.
It's so fun.
And
You
it's
can have your little business meeting.
I think it's supposed to be business meeting. It's like, because I think all the executive ones have a boardroom on one end of it, so it holds up to 5 people, and you can all be in there at the same time and have a meeting. But then some of the trains have a salotino, which I guess is just like a little. I think there's a couple per train, or per car, and you can just kind of like if you want a family of 4, just once they're really nice.
Huh,
like
that's cool.
it's probably the nicest train ride you will get on a consumer train in Italy, if that makes sense. Like, it's got individual lights, it's got your own luggage rack, your own power socket. You have the stewards that come by and offer food and drinks, and they bring you their food and drinks rather than you have to go get it like some pauper. I think they bring it to you. We've never traveled executive because it just feels like executive. Like, maybe we don't need to spend that much money on a train. But if this is like a big vacation, or if the difference in price between like economy, or what do they call it, second class, and executive, I think is like, I don't know, it's $80 for 2 people on economy, and it's like $200 for 2 people on executive. So for us, it's like, I'm not spending 120, or I can a whole other train trip for that.
That's a whole stay in a hotel.
Exactly.
For one night.
But I'm thinking for some of you listening, that might not be that much. And if you do take it, please send us photos. Yeah. I'm very curious to see how it looks on the inside.
Let us know how your travel was.
Yes. Let us know if it's worth it. But yes, there are basically, I think, arguably 4 classes.
Okay. So next is the next kind of train type you can take is the InterCity. You explain that better than I do.
I think it's best explained as a small and medium city to a large city. Is a better way to explain it than anything else, I think.
But it's also a slower trip.
I'd say slightly slower, like depending how far you take it, for 2 reasons. 1, it just doesn't physically run as fast as the high-speed train, and 2, it does make more stops. But for an example, a train from Salerno to Rome, I think on the Frecciarossa is it's something like 3 hours, and it's like 3 hours and 45 minutes on the InterCity. So you're only, for half the cost, you're only spending another 45 minutes on a train. And this InterCity is typically far cheaper. Like, it's usually half the price of the Frecciarossa. Like, we were looking at Salerno to Milan. It's 100 euros for 2 people, but on the InterCity, it's 40 euros for 2 people. The difference is, instead of spending 5 hours on a train, you spend 8 hours on a train, I think. Okay. And that's where like the time difference starts to really get like noticeable, like really long distances. But if it's, I think you and I have used the InterCity to a lot of effect when you don't want to be too early and not be able to check in for a hotel. If that makes sense. So if it's like Frecciarossa gets you there at 12, you're like, I want to get there kind of closer to 1, it gets me a little closer to check-in time. That's when I think the InterCity is helpful, because it's cheaper and it takes a little more time.
Yeah. And so for that one, sometimes you can book your seats for InterCity, right? But not always.
Yeah.
It'll say when you go to book your train, whether that's available or not. Sometimes they just are like, go to this car.
And I think that's the thing. It's like 85% of the time you will get your seats in advance. And like pretty much every single time you and I have taken InterCity, we've gotten our seat number in advance. This is typically for like certain routes will often change the layout or configuration. Like, they're not sure which cars they'll attach that day. So they don't want to, I think, because once in the past we've gotten like, sat at 22A and B, and we got to the end of the car and it ends at 20 and we're like, oh, what is this? So I think it's something like that, where they don't want to like commit to a seat number. But typically on both of those Freccias and InterCities, you will be assigned a seat and a car, which means you don't have to like validate your ticket or anything like that. It's just like an airplane ticket. You show up at the time, you go to the car number, you sit down, and you're good. You're fine. As long as your name matches the name that the conductor has on their little iPad, or whatever they have these days, or as long as you have a little confirmation code or your QR code, whatever it is you have, as long as it matches, you're fine. You don't have to validate anything or anything like that.
Yeah. And for the intercities, there's the second class and first class, so there's no business or executive on those trains.
And I'm not entirely sure there's a difference between the first and second class. Like they say there is, but I think like when you look at the photos, it's like in first class they put like a little plastic partition between like the sets of four
Yeah.
rather than just having nothing. And then I think that's like
Do you get like free snacks or something?
no free snacks. I don't think the chairs go back. I think they're slightly nicer chairs, like slightly nicer. But again, we're talking about the difference between, I guess it's 44 euros on second class to go from Salerno to Milan. I think it's like 52 to go in first class from Salerno to Milan. So for the extra €3 a person, I'm not really expecting like
Yeah.
a huge amount of, huge upgrades. €4 a person, I guess.
Okay, so the last kind of train that TrenItalia has is the Regionale, the regional train, which is the slowest train. Do you have anything to say about the regional train?
Tons.
Okay,
Came to the right place.
go off.
Well, no, and actually it's part of the reason we wanted to make this episode is the regional train can be a little confusing for a variety of reasons, but one, you have to validate the ticket at the beginning of your trip. What this means is if you are going from Rome to like Rio Maggiore, which is the first town in Cinque Terre, you have to validate your ticket from La Spezia to Rio Maggiore before you leave Rome, not before you leave La Spezia, which is some 3 or 4 or 5 hours later. And the reason that's important is because obviously when you're going to Cinque Terre, there will be conductors that come through and try to check tickets, and they do like to catch people who have not validated a ticket before the journey began, not before that train began. And as I have found, mostly from accident, that if the journey starts and you don't validate the ticket, it becomes impossible to validate the ticket.
And is this for physical tickets? You have to validate them by the machine in the train station.
This is where it gets a little tricky. This is mostly for e-tickets.
Oh, okay.
So for a physical ticket, it does get a little different. And you can still do physical tickets for anyone listening. If you are somebody who prefers a physical ticket to a e-ticket or a email ticket, online ticket, anything like that, I'm fairly certain you can still go to the ticket desk and ask them to print out your ticket for you. It used to be a thing you could do, and I don't think they would have changed it. COVID made things kind of weird because they were encouraging people to use like their own like phone for it or print it out at home. But the reason that's important is because a regional ticket is kind of like a bus ticket, I think is a good way to describe it.
Okay.
You can use it whenever you want. Even if you, like, let's just say, for example, you bought a train from Rome to Rio Maggiore and it leaves Tuesday at 10 o'clock. But you don't get to La Spezia, which is where you have to switch to get the regional train to Cinque Terre, to Rio Maggiore. It doesn't get there till, let's say, 2. You don't necessarily have to take the 2:05 train to Rio Maggiore. You can take any train that day or literally any train, like...
It's just that ticket is good for a journey from point A to point B.
And as described on the ticket. And sometimes they're good only for that day. And I think that's what changes. I think we've seen some of the tickets, I think, when we got in Rome are regional that were only good for that day. And some didn't have a date printed on it, which made me think that they're good for whenever you want to use them, which means I think it's kind of that's more geared towards people because the regional train is very much small city, typically into a big city. It's like kind of think of like veins and arteries, like a lot of small towns outside of Rome, a lot of small towns in Naples. People will take that into work, basically.
The InterCity?
The Regionale.
Sorry, thank you, the Regionale.
So it helps to get like a stack of the tickets rather than have to buy a ticket every morning. Right. So that all being said is, yes, it is not... if you have a physical ticket, I think you can go by what's on the ticket. If it has a date, you have to use it that day, but you don't have to use it that time. And if you have a physical ticket, you have to validate it before you get on the train, but not necessarily before you start your journey, if that makes sense.
Okay, so if I'm taking a trip from Rome to Rio Maggiore, and I have a physical ticket for my Regionale train from La Spezia to Rio Maggiore, I can validate that physical ticket in La Spezia.
Correct.
But if it's on my phone, I have to validate it before I leave Rome.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is deeply confusing for every single human being involved, including Italians. And I will say on that note, there's also some sort of confusion. I think a lot of people do get their tickets on like Omio, which we've like linked in the description in the past. It's kind of like an aggregate for trains and buses and flights. You can get it on train line. You can get it on Italia Rail. You can get it on TrenItalia. But essentially, there's, I think, this conception that you can only get, basically you can only validate your regional train ticket properly if you get it through TrenItalia.com, not if you get it through all these other ones. That's not true. You can validate it through any of them, which is one of the reasons they sell them. And I think that's the biggest thing, apart from the fact there's no first class on regional trains. It's only second class. There's no assigned seats. It's very much first come, first serve, which often means some trains will be standing room only, because there's no mechanism in place to say that there's 450 seats in this train and there's 500 people on board. There's nothing that'll kick people off.
It's a bit like a subway in that way, or the metro or whatever it is. There are seats, but it's just kind of a free for all.
It's just kind of a free for all, exactly. And I think the only big thing is some of the Leonardo Express is a big one. I only wanted to mention that very briefly because that's the train you can get from the airport in Rome, the Fiumicino, Leonardo da Vinci Airport, into Rome. It's called the Leonardo Express. And the reason I want to mention that just out loud is we're often at train stations and people are on the little kiosk, and I feel bad because I don't want to tell them what to do, but they often get the next train into Rome. And more often than not, it's not the train they want because they want to get into the middle of Rome. And what they get is a regional train to Tiburtina, which is in the outskirts of Rome. It takes an hour and a half. It stops at every stop along the way. And it's only useful if you're going to Ostiense or something like that. It is really not useful if you're going into the middle of Rome. I think the only way to get to the middle of Rome is with the Leonardo Express, but that itself is a regional train, and that's one of those, again, free-for-alls. You have to be there when
it's faster than...
Yeah, it's 22 minutes instead of...
It's fast, and it goes directly there, so that is a really good point. Thank you. If you are coming into Rome and you're coming into Fiumicino, Leonardo, what is their airport actually?
I think it's Leonardo da Vinci.
Okay. You definitely want to take the Leonardo Express.
It's worth the 14 euros per person, or a ridiculous price.
And it is a bit confusing when you're looking at the screen because, like you said, you want to just click the next one. You're like, I'm in a hurry. I want to get there as soon as possible. I'm going to click the next train coming. Don't do that. Take a beat. Get the next Leonardo Express.
Especially because this is just for people going to Rome who are, this is not that great information, I guess, for people going to Milan, but on that screen that shows the next trains, some of those, if you look, it's the next 5 trains, and you might think that's throughout the day, but if you look closely, it might literally just be throughout the next 20 minutes. Because I think the Leonardo Express is one every 20 something minutes has a new train, so sometimes that'll be on the same screen with 3 different regional trains going to Tiburtina, Ostiense, and some others, maybe Ostia or something like that, which is not one you want to take at all. So all that being said is, yeah, it pays to be diligent and know that you're looking for that. The Regionale sign is a little R. It's a little stylized R. It's impossible to describe, but if you see the stylized R, that's what you want.
For the Leonardo Express?
Yes.
Okay. I think maybe we should split this into 2 episodes.
Because we still have at least one more train type to do before we get to the fun ones?
Yes. I think we should do one more train type and then do the fun ones in the next episode.
That sounds like a plan.
All right. What is your next train type?
It's the InterCity Notte.
Yes.
The InterCity night trains. For, I mean, lack of a better word, that is literally what it is. Yeah. For the word. Do you want to talk about them?
No, I want you to talk about them.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, but I can still talk. Chime in, please.
I'm going to talk a lot about them. I have many opinions for the next episode.
For the next episode? Okay, so this is just me wearing myself out for before. Okay. The InterCity Notte is just like the InterCity train we talked about before. It's InterCity. It's quite limited in its run. You can only kind of go certain places, but it still connects most of the big cities, but it does it overnight, which is pretty big. I think for a while this was falling out of style because people wanted faster trains, not night trains, and now it's kind of going the other way. A lot of people are asking for overnight trains because essentially, as we've talked in a previous episode, if you're getting off work at 7 or 8, you don't necessarily want a 2-hour train, 3-hour train to Florence for the night. You want, because then you're going to get in and have to pay a hotel room. Why not just do an overnight train, or just overnight train all the way to Venice or something like that. So all that being said is there are overnight trains. There are actually, I think, 2 different kinds. I think Frecciarossa is doing an overnight train, but it's only You have to sit at a little seat the whole time, but they're super cheap. It's like it starts at like 30 euros, I think, to go really far, really long distances. And I think 40 if you want to go to like, I think first class starts at 40 or something like that. But you're still sitting in a seat the entire time. You're not laying on a bed. So it's not a great option, in my opinion. InterCity Notte typically has 3 different classes. It's the seat, which again, budget traveler kind of things only potentially. It's not that comfortable looking at all. You can also get like a bed in a room of 4 or 6 beds, which is a kind of an interesting option. That's what I was in China. That's how it was set out, except it wasn't a room. It was just in a hallway of beds. But it's like 4 to 6 beds in a little room, and then the bathroom's down the hall. So you have to share a bathroom. There's no shower, but there is a toilet and a sink and a mirror. So it's a little bit more roughing it. But then there's like the Excelsior, I think, is like a type of first class, but essentially it's first class, and almost all of them have individual rooms. I think it's 1, 2, and 3 berth rooms. So, and I think they changed it during COVID. Like it used to be an individual traveler could book one room in one bed in a 3 berth room, but during COVID they're like, you can't do that. If you're traveling alone, you have to get the 1 berth room. And I don't think they've stopped doing that since COVID. I think they've kind of continued that idea. But it's 1, 2, or 3 beds in a room, and almost all of these have showers.
Private showers.
Private showers.
Okay.
Which is really quite nice. And I think both of them come with both that that first class and second class. I think both of them come with a continental breakfast in the morning delivered to you. Little juice, a little coffee, I think a newspaper. It's amazing. And it's a little like, I don't know, it's not, I hate to say, don't think nice. Think 90s nice.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, think like, okay, in the 90s, this was probably kind of nice. Like, well past the golden age of train travel, but like, this could be a fun way to go see the grandparents. Let's take the night train up there. And then we wake up, we'll see the grandparents. Yay. Like that kind of thing. I don't know, we did like overnight car trips. I think it was the same thing. But it could be a really fun option if you like trains, if you're into like a slow method of travel, and because it's pretty much, I mean, a lot of these are kind of the same price as a hotel room. Like even though the showers, it might only be like $200 something for 2. I think I looked for both of us.
Okay.
It was like $240 for 2 travelers to go from Salerno to Venice, and I was like, that's not bad. Like you get the shower, you get the 2 beds, you get the night in the train,
and you get from one place to the next.
And you get you wake up the next morning and you're basically stepping off the train in Venice. Like what a cool way to do it. So that is a fun option for anyone looking for a little bit of I don't know, like it's just a different train method. Those are still available on TrenItalia.com, and that's just, you just, look later, basically. Like I think instead of looking in the morning, but I think at like 7 or 8.
Because you can choose the time that you want your train to depart when you're looking at your train travel,
yes.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I think depending where you're leaving from, obviously, a lot of the night trains try to they leave their origin city at like between 6 and 8. And then the latest they'll arrive is like 11 in the morning.
So they leave at 6 and 8 p.m.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So I think from Salerno it might leave like 6 p.m. But from Rome it might leave at 9 p.m. From Florence it might leave at like midnight or 1, and then they all get into Venice at I think 10 or something like that. So it depends where you're leaving from. But
10 a.m. the next day.
10 a.m. the next day.
Okay.
But it's kind of a fun option, I think, too, if you were. Again, if you like traveled around Italy, especially if you're by yourself, if you travel around Italy and you're in Venice and you're flying out of Rome, instead of going to Rome a day early, having a hotel, and then flying out that day or the next day, you can just take a train there overnight and then wake up and then go straight to the airport. And it could be a fun way to do it, because I think that's like used to be that sort of way to save money, is have a super early flight from the airport and just spend the night walking around a city. But I don't know. That seems less popular these days.
I wouldn't want to do that.
No. I don't want to get sweaty and tired before getting on an 8-hour, 9-hour flight. It seems like a terrible idea. So
I like my sleep too.
Yeah. No. So that's all. I think these are pretty much predominantly the more used, and the most likely classes and types of trains you're likely to come across. There are other types of trains, like even the Frecciarossa. It's like Frecciarossa 1000, Frecciarossa 700. You don't have to really worry about what these means. It just is like the speed of the train changes. The same thing, the Bianca and the Argento. It doesn't matter that much. The biggest things to just keep in mind are, if you're on a regional train, you have to validate your ticket first. If you're not on a regional train, you don't have to worry. If you're not on a regional train, you have to sit where you were assigned. They will absolutely gently but firmly move you to where you are assigned.
It's remarkable how many times every time we're on a train, there's several people who are in the wrong seats.
Yes, but I think at least most times because they were with their friends and they weren't sat next to each other, so they're just gonna sit next to each other and be like, oh, it's empty next to you. It's like, for this leg, but then we're picking somebody up in wherever, and then it's not empty anymore. And I think also, for what it's worth, in a regional train, if you don't validate your ticket, it's a €20 fine. But in a Frecciarossa or any of the fast trains, if you are traveling without a ticket or a valid ticket, it's like a €250 fine. So I'm not at all advocating for traveling without a ticket, but if you're gonna travel without a ticket, don't do it on the Frecciarossa trains. Do it on the regional ones. And I think that's pretty much like the most important things of train travel in Italy, tied with our other one of when to book the tickets. And I think the last thing, if I can, just very briefly, is we mentioned all these discounts for Frecciarossa, or the TrenItalia in general. That is definitely something, listener, to look into. And you don't have to look into it in any fancy way, but very briefly, just to kind of give an idea, like Frecciarossa does discounts for same day turnaround. Like if you're going to do a day trip somewhere, they offer discounts. If you're going and coming back on the same day, they'll offer like, I think 50% off. I think it's 40% off if you're going and coming back on a weekend. So if you leave on a Saturday and come back on a Sunday, it's 40% off the base price. You mentioned a 2-for-1. That is 2 tickets sold at the base cost of 1 ticket. There's a me and you price, which are 2 tickets sold together. I think it's like 40 or 50% off, which is pretty much the same as 2-for-1, but slightly different. If you're under the age of 30, you can technically get the young ticket, which is usually about 40% off, but only in certain cars, only in certain days. Not certain days, like certain trains of the day. Like those are not typically found. I think like a lot of the morning and evening trains are reserved for like workers, like business workers. So they don't really offer cheap discounts for youth then. I think that's the family. If you're traveling with family, kids under 5, I believe, travel for free. Kids under 15 travel for 40% off, if I'm not mistaken. And I think a family has to include 3 people. Otherwise, they just give you the me and you or the 2-for-1 price. So it's like it could be you and 2 kids. It could be you, your partner and a kid. It could be, there's 3 people who are generally related to each other, no kids, because I think even if it's just 3 people who have no kids, it's still 20% off or something like that for the 3 of them.
And then what about there's a price for when you're over a certain age?
Yeah, if you're over, I want to say there's a couple different ones, but I think there's 55 is one of them. If you're over 55, you get a discount. 65 and 75. I think it's like 3 different levels. Which is kind of interesting. So yeah, there's 3 different levels, and again, some of those you have to have a codice fiscale, a fiscal code. You could actually get one as an American. It's not difficult. It's not impossible. It's not illegal or anything like that. It's just I don't know. It's just like a code registered to your name that is not at all private either. It's one of the things that like
it's not like a social security number.
Yes, it's not like a social. It's like if you know somebody's birthday, their first and last name, you also can then generate their codice fiscale. And they just need it for like, even if you sign up for like a rewards program at a grocery store, they need a codice fiscale. So yeah, that's a good point as well. And there's still a few other ones in there too. Like, there's also, if you're like disabled in any way, there's a major discount. If you have a carer, they have a discount as well. There's a huge, basically it's
lots of ways to get discounts.
There's a lot of ways to get discounts on the train. It seems like almost nobody pays the full price on a TrenItalia, which is one of the reasons I think you and I like it so much. It's like, you're going back and come back the same day. That's cheaper. You're going, come back on a weekend, cheaper.
You don't need like a special discount code or anything. Whenever you go to book your ticket, you put in your date, how many people are traveling, your return date, destination and place you're leaving from. And then when you click like which journey you want to take, under that will be a drop down for each leg of your journey. And that is where you will choose, which discount you're applicable for.
And that is a very good point. Yes, because I think the first few times we thought we were like somehow scamming the system, because like, wait, we could take these 2 economy tickets, but like this me and you price is half the price. Like, what is it? Like, let's just do that. Like, what happens if we click this and don't tell anybody? And then we realize it's literally designed for that. It's like designed for couples or like any 2 people traveling together. So we thought we like hacked the system, and then we realized we're just
using the system the way it was
as it's designed. So yes, when you, as you mentioned, you click your thing, and sometimes there's none. Sometimes there really are no cheap options. It's just, it is what it is. And for some trains, for some times of the day, I have no idea what like the moon cycle it's in or something. The planets are aligned. Mercury's in retrograde. TrenItalia is losing money. They have to like cut the discounts. And this does not include that, as you mentioned with Italo, TrenItalia also runs like Freccia days, which are like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They have this like crazy discount, like 70% off. And then I think they also just run like 14 days of August, you can use this discount code for 20% off of certain trips. And some of these discount codes stack, some do not. So I think like the me and you will stack with some, but like the Freccia Young does not stack with any, things like that.
But all those codes and like special sales, with both websites, they typically have like a scrolling banner, but not banner, but like it's very obvious on their homepage like what discounts they're running.
Yes.
So you don't need to go like try to find secret discount shopping codes or anything.
Exactly. You don't have to do like,
pretty obvious on the homepage.
There's none of that like what TrenItalia coupons 2024, nothing like that. It's on the homepage. They tell you what they have. And sometimes again they just run random ads. Like if they're trying to get people to go to Bari, they'll run ads and run discounts for people going to Bari. So it's a bit of a casino, as they say here. It's a bit of a toss up. But I think, that was everything I think that I wanted to cover personally.
I think that was great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So in the next episode, we're going to talk about fun trains, historic trains, and luxury trains. Fun and historic are synonyms in this case.
Yes.
Luxury, we have no firsthand experience, but
they sound bougie.
They sound amazing, is what Darcy meant to say. And if you'd like to gift us 2 train trips on this lovely train line, please let us know. We are willing to accept $7,000 worth of train travel on your behalf.
Okay.
So I think that's everything.
I think that's everything. If you enjoyed this episode, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this podcast. I sound like I'm doing an ad. This is real life. This is me talking. If you have any questions or want us to talk about anything specific, you can reach out on Instagram at onlyabagpodcast, or you can send us an email. And our email address is onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to read some stuff that Nathaniel has written, you can go to onlyabag.com.
Yeah, and then if you'd like to support the podcast, we do have affiliate links in the description for, I think, Trainline and Omeo. I think that's it. But if you'd like to support us, if you'd like to book your next train trip through us, we'd love that. We'd really appreciate it.
Meaning through our affiliate link.
We are
not travel agents.
We're not travel agents. We also don't run a train line. So we are not involved in any way in this train trip.
They just give us a little bit of a kickback.
Yes. It will not cost you anything extra. They give it to us from their percentage. So if you'd like to support us, you can do so by using the links in the description. Besides that, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. We're going to talk to you in a few minutes about these luxury and historical train trips.